All right. So hey, Gay, let's get started today.
How are you?
Good.
I'm well, thank you.
Hello.
Thank you. I'm well. Hey, guys. All right. So we're going to talk about Seneca's 11th letter today, the blush of modesty. This is one of my favorite letters that I've come across so far with Seneca, because it touches on two things that, man, I continue to struggle with in my life. One is the idea that you can't run away from yourself, that no matter how many mechanisms you put in place, no matter how many times you train yourself or try to change your ways, it's not going to happen. And I'll tell you some funny stories about how I've tried to do that to other people, actually. And then the second half of it, he talks about essentially getting yourself a mentor. It's kind of above reproach, right? And that is something that I've struggled with my entire life and still struggle with today. And I think only because I haven't found somebody who's got a ton of credibility. So hopefully, and I'll say that in these groups, a lot of times, a lot of the things you guys say and what you provide to me is more credible than I think a lot of the mentors that I've had in my past that I've tried to attach that mentorship label to. So real quick, just a little bit about me, you guys, you'll know. So my name's Eric. I host this group. Started about 6 months ago. I actually just got the little notification that today is our 50th meeting that I've had on this thing. So it's kind of a little milestone for me, I guess. But so I am 41, about to be 42. I'm a lawyer here in Michigan. And one of the reasons that this letter today for me is really kind of poignant is I didn't grow up with a father. My mom was an 18-year-old heroin addicted hooker when she got pregnant with me in Southern California in 1980, in a time where she was hanging out with hippie surfers, having a good time, got involved with drugs. And then after I was born, like that was my life for like 8 years. I just kind of roamed around Southern California like a nomad, pretty homeless, just hanging out with hippies and surfers and drugs and hedonistic orgies and all of that stuff. But never had like a solid fatherly figure. And then I went to foster care. I had 8 of them. Never one that kind of took that I still to this day kind of talk to, sports coaches. And then in the military, there were leaders certainly there, but I've never had a mentor, male or female, that I could look at and say, every aspect of your life, I respect because you've got credibility as an upstanding, noble person. And I still struggle with that, finding one solid, single person. But like I said, I get bits and pieces from different people. So yeah, this letter and those two aspects, I think is going to be fun to talk about today. So I'll start off with our Stoicism 101. Stoicism is an ancient philosophy, of course. It's premised on living a happy life through virtuous actions. And the 4 virtues are wisdom, justice, moderation, and courage. And then this is all wrapped up in the dichotomy of control, which I've labeled the Stoic serenity prayer of identify the things in your life that you can control and the ones that you cannot. And then you don't worry about the things you can't control. And then the ones that you can't control, you work like hell to affect them every day, right? And that's it. And the one thing I've realized recently, talking to a lot of people about Stoicism and my practice of it, is a lot of times people like to come back to quotes of all of these old guys, right? Seneca, Aurelius, Zeno. And they have amazing kind of playbooks for life when it comes to Stoicism outside of those 2 principles, the dichotomy of control and then the 4 virtues. And I've always looked at Stoicism as just a very simplified kind of elementary approach to life, and it works. Like, it's so simple, why change it? And that is always my 2 things that I go to every time I talk about Stoicism is 1, the virtues, the 4 virtues, and the dichotomy of control. And those 2 things, like right off the top, seem to give a lot of people perspective that can help solve their problems, give them direction in life, understand their purpose, and then get through the troublesome times in life just with those 2 ideas, right? The fact that every action that you undertake should be virtuous, encompassing those 4 things. And then the other part of it is the dichotomy of control. And there is a lot of power in understanding those 2 concepts. And then when you get into what I call the kind of Stoicism, 202 or the kind of graduate level stuff later on is when you can really dive in and get some specific examples that these guys use. But this letter and the way that I kind of give people the idea of how to use Stoicism in their lives, I think match up perfectly. And it's really simplicity of it, of you need to understand that no matter what you do in your life, there are going to be things you cannot change about yourself, right? If you're, like he talks about in the letter, that if you're faced with a situation you've never faced before and you're naturally ignorant, for no fault of your own or fault of your own, you're going to have a physiological response that you can't change. You're going to be nervous. If you have never spoke to a room of 500 people and you get up to stand up, you're going to have chattering teeth. You're going to blush. You're going to, it's going to sound like you're standing on a waterbed during an earthquake. You're going to be shaking so much. If you've ever taken public speaking before doing any public speaking classes in college or high school or whatever, you know what I'm talking about. I can tell you the funniest story I have of this is my first time going to court and arguing a motion, for real arguing. One of my law school professors he would hand out these golden paper clips to people when they graduated and say, this is to hold together your motion. You're going to have a time in your legal career coming up here pretty soon where you're going to go to court and you're going to argue something that's really meaningful to you, and attach this golden paper clip to it is a reminder of where you've come from and where you're going, kind of thing. That was a cool idea, so I kept that golden paper clip and hung it somewhere and said, hey, I finally get to the point where I'm got my big boy shoes on and I go to court, I'm going to use that. And I did this pretty early on. I had a case where we have something what's called a motion for summary disposition, where you essentially try to go to the judge and say, there's no need for us to go to a jury, just rule right now for my clients. So I got all these paperwork, and you can imagine this. It's a briefcase full of documents that I'm taking to court. So on the actual motion itself that I'm going to file with the court that day, I put this golden paper clip on it. I get to court and I undo my briefcase and I pull out my motion, and my paper clip, because it's a paper clip, had gotten other papers underneath it. So when I took the motion out, I had to sort through what papers had slid under that paper clip, and then gave it to the clerk to file, and then went in and sat in court and waited my turn to go. And then I finally get up there and start arguing it. And I'm going off I had prepared, I'm quite shaky, I'm nervous, but I had prepared and I, talked to myself in the mirror. So I was feeling pretty good. And I was probably 10 minutes into it, and I referenced Exhibit A. I said, Your Honor, just like I'm saying, and everything that I've said, go ahead and look at Exhibit A. It's exactly what I'm talking about. And he goes and pulls up the copy that I just filed with a golden paper clip, and there's no Exhibit A. Exhibit A had fallen out because it's a paper clip, but it doesn't actually clasp onto the papers. So there was no Exhibit A. And he goes, Eric, I can't rule on your motion without your exhibit actually attached to this. And I, for whatever reason, didn't have a copy for me of my exhibits because it was such a big document. I only had the top portion of the actual motion, not the exhibits. And I lost the entire case because of that damn magic paper clip. But when he said that, when he's like, Eric, your motion, your exhibit isn't here, I recognized immediately, oh, I'm in a lot of trouble. This is not good for me and this motion and this client. This is going to be bad. And what he talks about, what Seneca talks about, of that blush of modesty, it was a tsunami of modesty that washed over me, because it was you didn't do what you were supposed to do. You were in a new situation. You relied on this stupid magic paper clip in a way that has now, to your detriment. That was really the first and only time in my legal profession, my professional career, that I was standing before somebody with this blush of oh my gosh, I can't control myself physiologically. I'm shaking. I'm red in the face. I know I've screwed up, and it's never going to happen again. And it hasn't. I'll tell you right now, in my practice, if you bring me anything with a paper clip on it, the first thing I do, automatically, I remove the paper clip and put a binder clip on it. Anybody that knows me, anytime I'm handed I don't care if I'm at the DMV, I don't care if I'm at Kroger, I will take the paper clip off and put a binder clip on it because of that one experience. So that's one small story about kind of the blush of modesty for me. And I've got many more that we'll go over, I'm sure. But I want to hear from you guys. I want to hear what it is that you think that you have in your existence that is your blush of modesty. I just talked to my wife about this idea. I said, give me your perspective. What is it that I do that I have an automatic response that you think is either a character trait or a flaw of mine or a way that I automatically respond to? And we talk a lot about my son. I have a 3-year-old son that I get frustrated with all the time because, he's 3. And I thought that she was going to say that, automatically you get frustrated with Everett a lot. And she said, that's not true. You change depending on the circumstance and the context. You don't have an automatic response like that to more normal things. And the only thing that we could come up with that I do is when I'm first presented with a narrative in my job, meeting friends, meeting you guys, no matter what it is, if somebody's telling me a story, I have such an overactive brain and I think a lot. I ask so many questions all the time that when I'm first presented with a new narrative, I start asking questions instead of just listening, instead of just being present, instead of just taking all the information in. I automatically start asking questions and kind of bookmarking and indexing the narrative. And then the flaw in that is I have to ask again, hey, I'm sorry, can you repeat that? And it's really troublesome for me because clients a lot of times will get into these long, 10-minute long diatribes. And then I have to go back, oh, hey, sorry, you need to tell me that whole story again. And like, I just told it to you. And I go, yeah, but why are you telling me I'm taking notes in my head or actually taking notes that I didn't get the whole thing? So I want to hear from you guys, the problems that not the problems really, but things that you've recognized and seen in your life that are automatic, that no matter the mechanisms, no matter the tips you listen to and what you try to do in your life, you recognize that you almost have this inherent automatic physiological response to things, whether it be, I've got a client of mine that I'm dealing with who every time she talks on the phone with her sister, it's crazy. She is a professional. She has more degrees than I have on my wall. And she gets shaky. She loses all confidence just because, and it's a younger sister, which is a little odd because of the childhood that they had. That her younger sister was a bully, and this woman is in her 40s now, and she still, to this day, feels bullied by her sister. And there's nothing that she can. And this is a legal client, so I haven't talked to her about stoicism. I want to, right? But there's a situation in our case right now. I'm like, hey, I need you to go to your sister and give me some information. She's like, I don't want to call her. I'm like, what do you mean you don't want to call her? She's like, I don't want to call her. So, and she told me that she has that response to it. So I want to hear what you guys do. If you're looking for help to change ways, or if you've helped people, that you can help us kind of change my way of how, I respond to that and what I could do to maybe stay more present instead of taking notes like that in my head and asking questions versus just, taking things as they come. That's what Stoicism tells us. And the other part of it, I would really love you guys to help me point out some people in your life or people that are maybe not in your life, but just in general, whether it be celebrities or philosophers or anybody else that you found that really to you just embodies the upstanding character of somebody that you can look at. Because the one thing that Seneca talks about that I struggle with all the time is not really self-discipline or I can't think of the word. I'm a little bit brave for it, but to do things, the integrity, right? The integrity aspect of life sometimes when, if I'm at the gym, if I'm at work, if I'm cooking, no matter what, I very quickly will fall to shortcuts when I know I shouldn't. And I'll lose a little bit of integrity if I make a calculation in my own mind that, oh, this isn't going to hurt. But in the grand scheme of things, it's hurting something somewhere because I'm chipping off parts of my integrity as a human that I don't think I should. We've talked about earlier in having friends that you get to practice those noble qualities of being a human. And I think that when you start to chip away at integrity, no matter the cost of it, part of that noble quality starts to fall away. So if you guys can help me find a mentor that I can look at and kind of think is there, like he says, giving you direction and all of those things. So that's it. I'm going to shut up with all of my background and context and how I see this topic and let you guys make me better humans. And hopefully we can make each other better people. So I'll open it up. If you guys have anything you want to say, please feel free. Nobody, nothing.
I can share. So when you're talking about, and when I was reading in the passage about the way the body kind of can betray you, in certain circumstances, and it reminded me a lot. I just recently broke up with my fiance, and it's probably for the best, and it wasn't a good relationship, and there were some problems on her end. She's a difficult person for reasons I won't get into detail, but what I noticed is when we would get into certain tense arguments or whatever, and I think this is pretty normal, but I think the degree to which I'm sensitive to it is stronger. When I was in a position where I felt like I was being manipulated, or where she wasn't being forthright with me, and it reminded me of situations I've had as a younger child with my own mother, my body would go into this state where it was very, very, very not predictable, but like the symptoms of it were very my mouth would get dry, I would start shaking, you know, and I knew in those moments that I knew what I needed to do in those moments, which is to be calm, to take pauses and to think through things, and you know, not to be in a rush to fix it, and not be taking things so personally, whatever it is. But you know, as it said in the passage, you know, the wisdom isn't necessarily the antidote for these circumstances. And again, it felt like this. My body would go into this state, and it's to this day, you know, like we broke up almost 3 months ago now, but every once in a while she'll message me about something, and I notice my body like just goes into that state. But you know, before I really even process what's happening, or you know, there's just this sort of, and it feels sort of like my body's betraying me. Anyways, you know, I don't know how much this is applicable to Stoic ideas, but I know for me, it's just been a process of recognizing when that happens, instead of acting on it, which that's what my body wants it to do. It wants to act. It wants to take this energy and pour it into the situation. And I've realized time and time again that gets me nowhere. You know, it's been a process of just sort of tuning into myself and recognizing I need to work with myself. I need to work with my own physical body and to get to a place of groundedness before I do anything else. Yeah, and I don't know if I should just mash up, but you know, you're asking about different people we turn to, and I like that idea too. I couldn't think of a specific person that I call to mind, but certain people in general in this type of process, which is, you know, when they're encountered with injustice or something that's not right, or somebody's trying to pull something on you or whatever, you know, that there's certain personalities I've noticed that have this sort of Teflon nature, you know, this is way of responding to the world of, they see what's happening. It's not like they're a fool and they don't let themselves be taken for a fool. But there's almost this inner sort of fortitude of like, whatever you're pulling on me right now is nothing, there's nothing you can take from me. I don't need to take this personally. I don't need to see you as a threat. I don't know where this conversation is going to go, but I don't need to fear that my soul will be swept away in the process.
Yeah, to that point, I'll say I've had the analogy before that I'm glad you used the word Teflon. When it comes to especially anger and frustration, for me, I've always had this analogy of anger or frustration or any kind of negative emotion like that I see as these fireballs that other people have. And when they're thrown at you, you have a coating as a human on you that's kind of this viscous tar, right? And those fireballs hit you and they stick to you. And the longer that they stick to you, they start to fester and burn and just can consume your soul. So Stoic practice, the idea is when that fireball hits you, you got to get it off you as soon as possible. You got to detach from that emotion to be aware, to see things, to act rationally, right? And just like you said, Teflon, a Stoic sage is made of Teflon. Like it hits them, they're aware that it hit them, but for that millisecond, they go, okay, and then move on. And it never affects them. When my 3-year-old throws his fireballs of frustration at me, that shit goes so far up my ass, I need forceps to get it out. It's like there's no, I know it and I'm aware of it and I know it's coming and I'm getting better. But the one thing that I love that you talk about is there are people out there like that. And it's not like they were born like that, right? That's training, that's experience, that's built up resiliency, that's understanding themselves first and how to be aware of that and then respond appropriately. You know, I've said in the past that every bad decision anybody's ever made is because you were enveloped in emotions. You weren't able to detach completely from those emotions to make a completely rational and logical decision, which at the heart, that's really what Stoicism is, isn't it? Is detaching from those emotions. And not in a sense of, and I've gotten myself in trouble with detachment and attachment in conversations with people. And I actually just read an article in the New York Times recently that had a lot of criticisms about Stoicism. They talked about the idea that Stoics don't attach to anything, therefore they don't have any meaningful relationships. And I'd like to get into the semantics with the writer of the word attachment, but there really is something to the fact that you cannot attach yourself to emotions. You have to detach from those. But a detachment doesn't mean you're lacking awareness. It doesn't mean that you're not doing it thoughtfully or mindfully. It's the fact that you've recognized the emotion there. You may have recognized the emotion enveloped you, but if you didn't act when it was enveloping you and you were able to detach, address the situation, understand what a logical approach to it is, and then act, that's an appropriate response. That's all Stoicism is. That's the act in itself. That's the practice we're trying to get at. So when somebody cuts you off, that analysis and that process can hopefully take milliseconds. So you can say, oh, have a good day. I'm glad you cut me off today, right? Or for me, as you're talking, the doctor, I was thinking about when my body would do that, when I would shake, when I wouldn't be able to control myself. And when I found out the first time that my ex-wife was cheating on me, oh boy, it was like a pick your, 1990s daytime, talk show. And it was shaking. It was just everything. It was, oh my God. There was no way that I, first of all, knew how I would respond. I'd never been like cheated on that level kind of thing. But I had no idea. I had no awareness that, just like you also said, what I was attaching in the moment, those emotions that I was feeling was being fueled by something that happened a long, long time ago with my own mother. Therapy has helped me connect those two and be aware of the fact that any abandonment issues or property issues that I have of another human being relates to my crazy chaotic childhood. So having that awareness and applying that to the situation at the time and constantly doing that and training yourself, we can be those people that have like Teflon. I'll probably be when I'm 70 or 80 because I got another 30 years of the stuff to get through and practice before I'm going to be any good at it. But that to me is the name of the game. That's it. It's just being able to detach. And Ralph, who sadly I don't think is going to join us anymore, he's got a scheduling conflict with his firefighter thing, which makes me a little sad. But he had helped me a lot with my frustration with my toddler. He said it's the acronym of STOP. You actually stop. You think. The T. O is observe, P is process, right? So when you feel that, when you feel your face getting red, when you feel your body start to change, for me right now, if I'm ever in a situation where I've lied about something and I have to address it, I start to shiver. It's like I'm cold. I still have that response, and I love it because I know that like, oh, you fucked up. Like you did something in the past. You need to now face. Doesn't happen often anymore to me. But still, like I recognize that process is going to be a lifelong, training endeavor for me to try to get that time between the time that fireball hits me and I'm able to get it off me is going to take. And I'm never going to be Teflon. That's the idea of Stoicism too. Is like you're never going to be the sage. You're never going to be unless you were born like the Dalai Lama. I mean, that guy was born to be a Buddhist leader. Unless you're born to be a Stoic sage. I would like to think my son may have a possibility because I'm raising him as stoically as possible. He'll have a better chance to be Teflon Stoic by the time he's 60 versus me, right? I had 40 years of a life that lived non-stoically. Well, 35 of years of a life lived non-stoically before I started the stuff. And I'm still a rookie, really, in the name of this game, right? So I love what you said, and I feel the exact same way. Like when it's still even thinking about the times when I found that out, and it was like a 2-month process. Well, like every time it would be brought up, like I would shake and I couldn't control myself and there was no getting around it. Now, I guarantee you, if I found out through an admission or my discovery that my wife was cheating on me, my response honestly would be like, hallelujah. Yeah, this is awesome. I can't wait for this next chapter, right? Like I'm looking forward to it because I find the good immediately. I'm able to recognize so quickly that, and I don't want to miss this point at all. I want to highlight this. I recognize that my physiological response and how my body was reacting was because of something that happened to me a long time ago. It wasn't a novelty. It wasn't because I didn't know how to understand the situation. I had been through it before, and that was my body's own kind of defense mechanism of trying to protect me, I guess, in a way. So recognizing that through therapy, now just having that awareness, like in psychology, awareness is kryptonite, right? Like once you find it, you have it. That's the answer to a lot of things. But I know now that I'm probably going to have some sort of physiological response in the moment, but I just need to let that pass. And then once that is out of the way, I can start to think rationally and logically and get excited and have those, hallelujah moments. I get to go date again. I've seen what's out there. I'm excited, kind of whatever. But yeah, so I think that, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, finish your thought. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that, it helps me to remind myself that in those moments, when I can't control myself or my body does something that I cannot have power over, it's to take the lessons and make sure that the time's shortened than before or shorter than it was the last time. And if I continue to have these meetings and journal and read Stoic quotes and be, better equipped and prepared to get that time down, I'm on the right path. So that's all I was saying.
Yeah, and I think you touched on a couple of things there that are crucial, or at least the things that I've found are useful and things that I recommend to clients is, the two things. There's one is when you talk about attachment to this experience, and another way of saying that is identification with this experience. Again, like when I'm talking about these things come up, and what that energy wants to do is consume and take the wheel and create destruction is usually what it wants to do. And so being able to separate yourself, instead of going, I'm furious, I'm angry, like being able in your own head to be able to go, I'm experiencing the feeling of anger. I'm experiencing, it creates distancing, because that's what it is. It's not you, it's a part of you for sure, but you do have some wiggle room to decide whether I'm going to let this particular energy take the wheel. Being able to create distancing languages can be really helpful. And then the other thing which you spoke to indirectly is I know, again, when this thing's happened to me, I can maybe separate myself, but then I go into this other story of like, oh, why is this happening again? Why am I like this? Why? But shifting your mindset to this is an opportunity. It's here now. This is your time to practice. This is the time where you're going to make the most progress in changing this, like you said, in how can I make this shorter? How can I move on faster? How can I let this go? Engaging sort of skills-based mindset helps work with it, instead of just sort of spiraling out or just simply waiting for it to go away, which is, it's okay, I guess. But it really engaging with it and going, oh, here it is. You've got the dry mouth, you got the shaky hands. It's happening. It's right now. This is the thing. Now's the time. All the stuff we've talked about, it's time to practice this now,
Yeah, I'll tell you my mechanisms that I have in place, and Walker, so you have your hand up, I'll let you go for it to say this, is my mechanisms right now. And I tell my son, walk away, breathe. That's the first thing I do, is get out of the situation, walk away and breathe. And that's my stop moment, right? And then my observation is exactly what you talked about. And what I do is I give myself a play-by-play. I'm a huge baseball fan. So I will literally in my head start telling a narrative, like a play-by-play announcer of what's going on, to describe what's going on. So I'm like, thankfully it hasn't happened in a few days, but I give the example all the time. But I need to leave the house. My toddler wants to play. He's throwing a temper tantrum. And so I'll just kind of let him scream. Obviously, if he's screaming on the floor, I'll attend to him. But if he's just being his normal little jerk face, I'll walk away, breathe, and then say, Eric's son is throwing a temper tantrum because he wants to play and Eric wants to leave. And that's it. That alone, of just saying those words in my head, of like in a third person objective, what's going on, somebody across the street looking in my window, what do they see, kind of a thing. And I go, okay, this isn't a big thing. This isn't nuclear war here. This isn't, rocket science. This is a 3-year-old throwing a temper tantrum and you want to leave. Have some compassion, have a lot more patience, go at it again there, big boy. And that usually is enough for me. So those two things, I use the stop of get away, breathe, try to calm the actual, my heart rate, try to bring it down. I will, if it's bad, I'll get into block breathing, and maybe meditate. If I'm at work, a lot of times that'll do too. If I get somebody, come in and yell at me or something, if somebody gives me a paper clip on something, I'll start breathing or something. But yeah, so those are the specific mechanisms I use to try to get back to my base, really. All right, well, Carr, how you doing, sir?
Hello, I'm not from US. I'm actually from Pakistan, and I've been studying some parts of Stoicism. Obviously, I cannot claim that I know a lot, but Epictetus, that's what I found very fascinating. And he said that good and bad can only exist in yourself. So that was the thing that I found, that your choices, that the only good that is relevant to you is the choices that you make. And then there was a mention of giving assent to impressions, the impression that the world makes on your mind, the image that is made on your mind. That is the impression. So giving assent to that, saying yes to that impression, and withholding assent of that impression. And I've read it, and I take parts of things that I think that are reasonable to me. And I apologize, I don't remember the exact writers and books, but I read it somewhere that, and it changed my thinking about Stoicism, that assent to an impression is always determinant of that impression and never determined. It means that if an impression is made in your mind, then you have that obligation. You must determine the truth of that impression before reacting. So as you've been mentioning that I take a pause. So that's where that comes from, in between that impression and you saying yes to that impression. So we have to take a small pause. That's I've been practicing, that I pause myself before reacting. And in that small space, I can compose myself most of the time. So that's where I can compose myself and not react instead of acting, not react, that I can be my own man. And then the thing about the good and bad morality. So 2-3 years back, I've stopped believing in my religion, and I started thinking about things that are where do the morality come from? What is a human being? Uh, what is the difference between us and animals? So I also found that the differentiating factor, what differentiates us from other animals, is our sense of morality and our rationality and reasoning. So that the purpose of life, that I was also very confused about what does a rational man or man that believes in science or doesn't believe in a particular religion, or maybe he's an atheist, how can he have a purpose in life? What is the purpose of life? And that answer came in Greek philosophy, eudaimonia, being on good terms with your daimon, your inner higher self. So that was fascinating, and living accordance with nature. There is, and then I found that there is inspiration all around us. I mean, looking at, I have a big fig tree outside my house, and in summertime, it gives 2-3 kg of fruit, figs, and that tree became my inspiration. In taking inspiration from nature, because it gives fruit, it gives shade in summer, and it keeps on growing. So what is the human potential? Tree has its potential of to grow like a tree. So human being, from my logic, has a potential to grow in their morality and rationality. That is what separates us from other animals. So I found that logical purpose of life, and that uh, uh, that brief period of time, I thought that human beings don't have any purpose. And then I started believing Nietzsche's philosophy that every man can give their purpose to their own life. There is no one purpose. And then the Stoic philosophy that purpose of life is to be on good terms with your inner moral self. So that's it. I hope I didn't take much time.
No, you took exactly as much time as you needed. That was Perfect. Thank you so much. That was much better than my, 2-minute recitation of Stoicism. You actually, I think, went into like Stoicism 303 a little bit there. Perfect. You're absolutely right. And what we talk about of that moment of pause of my stop is that's our ascent to the impression, right? That's whether we say this is a true premise or not. And that's why it's so important in Stoicism to be absolutely clear on the definition of things, that the basis, the premise, and anything that you do in your life, the foundation needs to be, it's got to be clear, it's got to be truthful, and it's got to be communicated to everybody around you so everybody knows that. And if the basis of that isn't a scent all around, that everybody says, yes, this is what I believe in, everything up is never going to be, it's going to fall down at some point, right? I've always had this love of an idea of a perfect form of government. I'm a political scientist at heart and a history major, and I've always loved, like, what is the perfect political theory? And it's like, let's have a council of 100 people on this planet that we all, like 100 Barack Obamas, 100 Angela Merkels, right? These people that are the smartest among us, that have really ingrained rational thinking into their being, and pass something to them. Say, hey, are you 100 people? Is this something that we can all agree is a universal truth that should be the basis? And if 100 people say yes, then that's what we go forward with, right? But that's kind of the Stoic idea, that if somebody gives you an impression that is flawed and you can recognize it right away, you do away with it. You don't spend any more time thinking about it. You absolutely say, I am not assenting to this impression. I'm going on with my day. So when my son throws a temper tantrum and I'm all over here in my, which is my left or right, whatever, my left brain logic going, logic tells me that you need to get your ass up and get in the car. Okay. And his right side brain of emotion is going, no, I need my toys right now. You don't understand, Dad. If I don't play with my toys, I'm not going to be happy. And that battle of logic and emotion going back and forth, he's never going to win, because his premise is flawed, right? He doesn't have logic enveloped in it. I do. I also am lacking compassion. So this will be a whole different conversation, but you're absolutely right that process is that's our ascent to it. And if you can't get there, then you got to move on, right? So if I find out that my wife is cheating on me now, I go, okay, the impression that I've gotten is that this woman has, gone against the commitment that we had, and she wants somebody else in her life rather than time with me. And it's hurt me in such a way that it has broken bonds of trust. The impression of what I thought our relationship was is no more. I mean, just move on, right? That's simply what Stoicism tells you to, and it's easy way to live that. Now, we're humans, and because we are humans, we have emotions and the self-awareness that you talked about. That I told you, one of the most fascinating things about human psychology is that we know, we can be told by that council of 100 that this is the absolute 100% only way that you're going to go forward and find happiness. And by damn it, if we don't choose to do the other thing, a lot of times, right? People tell you, stop eating processed foods, go to the gym, take care of your money. We've been told all of these things, and people still do the opposite, right? That's the fascinating thing of it being a human. Animals, on the other hand, animals are presented with hey, your forest and your home is being cut down because of a condo, you need to move. They don't stay there. They don't say, well, I'm going to sit here and fight this condo association and try to make they find other ways, right? And so anyway, I love everything you said, Walker, and it was a brilliant start to, or the middle of this next topic I want to get into with our Gay.
Yes, I have written something, of course, and I will start quickly so I don't take up all the time. A Stoicism meeting on old age. Well, let's not consider it superficial then, if I care little to wrinkle these papers a bit, as I, for one, do not believe in age in so much as I believe in stage, as so when I say stage, I mean STAGE, because I know I slur because of my retainers. So like with the first peoples here in Canada who have an elder who is looked up to by the chief, who the community at large looks up to because they have earned their title through experience, no matter their age, which is very similar to the Chinese government system of meritocracy, where when a mayor could be given 20 million people to look over, and once done well, could graduate to 20 million more. So while people might look at me as young, the fact still remains I am a great grandmother. And back when I was a young mother, I was at a different stage then than those who were the same age as me, but without a daughter. And to see it in reverse, it's like when the kids say the darndest things that someone 50 years their senior could not even have imagined conceiving of such a thing. That said, I wrote a book called I Grow Young, 10 Steps Back to Youth Forward. So I reserve what I consider to be old, just to be crystalline clear when I go about my life fighting the good fight. That is, making sure that pedophiles don't have sex with our children, as it is only in the way in which I am telling the story that is new. But the story itself is old. In fact, it is as old as age itself. So when people say age is just a number, out of default, I must quantify the stages unique to specific ages. So here among us Stoics, we understand if one wants to use oil of Olay because they fear they'll decay, they're no less better off than us when fearing the inevitable. For when living right, we should all be trying our best to be at our healthiest. Listen, when I was in my early 20s, I bought the Principal Secret and anti-aging skincare set being sold on an infomercial by Victoria Principal, an iconic figure from the then hit TV series Dynasty, and it costed me a pretty penny. And talking about TV and legacy, I do have another point to make on dying, as everyone thinks I make a fantastic co-host, but that's because I'm a mother and I want to co-host my offspring's life, because as parents, we want them to coast as much as possible because we want them to have it better than us. Otherwise, it's abuse if we're going to speak general public indoctrinated into a system of beliefs that entitles us to feel it necessary to receive from where we've been conceived. So Mason's in the house, so you're not wrong if you kicked around animosity for having been written out of your father's will to want you to be better off than him once he's still and no longer going to get up off the ground, yet still chooses consciously to shove your face into the dirt. But were it not for Stoicism, you might not enjoy the fight of finding your own worth. But now, with all inflation and inflated egos aside, you, young Eric, now know my thoughts are only as shiny as a pretty penny. Thank you so much for having me, sir.
Amazing. Thank you so much. You do such a great job with that. Thank you. That was great. So I want to switch gears and talk about this idea that Seneca talks about. So what is the cure for this blush of modesty? What is the cure for a part of you that you can't change? There's no mechanism, there's no training, there's no wisdom, there's nothing. This is who you are, right? And what is the antithesis of that? And he says there is no cure. First off and foremost, understand that this is who you are. But the one thing that you can do is find somebody to emulate. Find somebody that you have respect for, that you look at their life and go, that's the way to live. That's the perfect life. And try to emulate them and think, you create this kind of alternate reality where you're simulating a situation where they're watching over you and they're giving you directions, right? So like say it's, they're your father, they're your coach, they're telling you how to live life. And I've done this before because I've never had, like I said, I've never had somebody that I can go to. I've gotten very sad in the past before thinking about, my wife calls her mother, I think 2 or 3 times a week on the way home with, after she picks up my son in the car, and they have these half-hour conversations of just, mother-daughter stuff. And a lot of times she'll complain, they're like, oh, I just don't want to call my mom. There's nothing to talk about today. And as somebody that doesn't have parents, of course, my immediate response is going to be something like, well, you better, enjoy that what you have. But it's deeper for me because there are times when she'll just run almost like a therapist where you talk things out loud, you figure things out on your own. I have friends that I do that with, but for like really deep seated issues that, you know, I've got a struggle right now with substances in my life. Like I'm not abusing them or anything like that, but I'm trying to figure out why I do use them, why I, you know, choose to have a beer kind of thoughtlessly. And it, like I said, there's no abuse. I don't get drunk anymore, but like, why am I choosing? And it's just a history of who I am. But I've had this idea like, man, I would love to talk to somebody in their 60s or 70s that has been there and then said, either way, like, yeah, I cut it out of my life because I saw no purpose, or yeah, I kept it in. That's just what it is. And I'm like yearning for that type of conversation and that mentor. And in my past, I've thought like, okay, like I have a lot of respect for Barack Obama. Not so much since he got out of office because he's not helpless anymore, the jerk, but still, like him, I've looked at his life, I've read everything about him. I seem to have, you know, you get that sense of knowing somebody just by reading words that somebody else wrote about them or words they wrote, kind of a thing. And I get the sense that he's somebody that I could emulate in their day and think and picture in my head, like, you know, with his big booming voice and his finger, like, Eric, should you be doing this right now? Should you be having a beer? And it doesn't work. I can't create that simulated reality for me. So I don't have that mechanism in place. It's like, it's almost like I need somebody to actually text and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What would you do? What did you do when you were, you know, my age, kind of a thing. But and so I've done that my entire life. And now as I sit here, I don't have one because I find flaws in everybody, even Barack Obama. Seriously, the fact that like after he got out of office, he just kind of retired and went and, you know, did his own thing and none of the same skills. Like, where'd my guy go? You know, so, and the other part of the gay you mentioned on is ego. Ego for me has been something that my relationship with my ego and ego in general and the principles of what egos destroy. And I'm still waiting for somebody to tell me how ego has benefited anybody in humanity. But I always fall back to the idea that all of these people, male or female, the one reason that I find in their character trait is that they're egos. They're driven by some sense of their ego, mainly in the sense that if I'm talking about somebody I've never met, that means they're famous. And along with fame, there's a direct relationship between fame and ego if you don't deal with it the right way, right? But yeah, the bottom line is I don't have anybody that I look to right now that I could have that, you know, obviously it probably have to be imaginary because I don't have time to carry on a new friendship with anybody right now to that level or get a new dad in my life. But so what do you guys do? If you don't have anybody, hopefully you do have somebody that's in your life like that, a mentor that you can look to and ask questions. And if it's a God or a deity or a book or somewhere, I'll take anything, guys. Seriously, Stoicism is the only thing I found, but like we talked about before, it's a great playbook generally for your life. There's nothing you can look to and say, hey, should I have orange juice or water this morning, right? Like that's not Stoicism. Stoicism just tells you to act rationally and logically. And other than that, it then becomes subjective to your own life. And everybody's journey is differently, right? So my issues with substances right now are laughable in the face of a lot of my friends who are legitimate addicts and alcoholics who are saying, you don't have an issue, dude, like calm down. But for me, it's more of a philosophical question of, you know, why do I do this? Trying to be aware of my actions. And everybody I've talked to has given me the same response about it. Like, why are you doing this? What's the purpose? And what's the point behind it? So I've come to my Stoic friends. And I'll say this week, if anybody, first of all, I need to apologize. I was really sick this entire week. I had strep throat, and strep really is like my kryptonite. I got it Tuesday afternoon, and I was literally on the couch from Tuesday until yesterday morning. I'm just starting to, still not 100%. But I had all of these Stoic meetings this week lined up, and I had to cancel all of them because I was feeling like crap. But the purpose of those meetings for me is to get people to come in. And I originally had this idea of, hey, solve your problems through Stoicism, right? I want to grow this group. I want Stoicism to kind of become like, you know, an evangelical thing because I think it's so much benefit to people. So I want to grow it. I thought, well, what if I just had an open forum where I, you know, marketed to people like, hey, whatever problem you have right now, come and bring it to this room for an hour. Let's talk about it. And I guarantee you Stoicism is going to show you a path how to solve it. And I thought, well, fuck, like, that's what I want to do. I want people to come in this room, to come to these meetings. It may not even have problems, but say, hey, here's my problem, right? Be my mentor for this next hour and tell me how to do things. Mason, please be my mentor.
Hello. So when it comes to what you're talking about in reference to a mentor, I'm not sure how helpful this would be, but I've recently found this idea from Patrick Bet David, who has what he calls an MBA, a mental board of advisors, where you put maybe 4, 5, 6 individuals who you greatly admire, different aspects of their life and their personalities throughout history in your personal life on this board. And whenever you have difficult questions, and as someone in their mid-20s. I'm, after graduating college, you kind of lose a life course that's as linear and predictable as you've been given since you were a child, and things become a lot more confusing. You can't really rely on your parents as much to tell you what to do and how to live your life. So I've kind of tried to utilize this idea of having a mental board of advisors, because it is difficult to find a mentor these days. And that could be a useful tool. I try to present to them, okay, I'm thinking about trying to become, a military officer. Is this an idea that is worth pursuing or not? And then I kind of use what I know about these individuals to debate with these individuals about whether or not this is an idea worth pursuing. Is it virtuous? Is it, something that will be worthwhile? So that's just something that came to mind when you mentioned mentorship.
Dude, I love it, Mason. Actually, I love that idea. And I thought about similarly, like something like that, like taking bits of people from history. Like there are, like you, of course, I love military leaders, and there's a lot of stoic military leaders out there who are like as advertised stoics, not people that people write about and say, oh, they had stoic ideas. So I absolutely love it. I love having, like, I don't know, throw a number up there, say 5, right? And just have like the joint chiefs of advice for Eric, and just think like, given their situations, how they respond. I absolutely love that. I'm gonna have to write it out there. I actually have it like on my desk somewhere, but like, a Rolodex of the advisors. Thank you. Appreciate that.
If you
Go on.
could,
Sorry.
I would be very interested in those stoical sort of leaders. If you ever had the time to, write them down or anything.
Yeah, I'll send you an email as soon as I get a chance. I'll make a note. Alexa, put stoic leaders on my to-do list. I will absolutely do that the next chance I get. Probably tomorrow morning when I have to work and look at my to-do list again. All right.
Much appreciated, sir.
Thank you, sir. All right, well, Car, and then Shri.
So you've mentioned earlier that you observe yourself. You used to observe yourself when you're out of breath or very under pressure, and like I'm speaking on Zoom meeting, and if I have no experience in speaking to other people, then maybe my heart rate will go up and I start to breathe irregularly, and then I maybe shut up after a few minutes. So what about you yourself as an observer, as your mentor? Because what I've read in particularly in Epictetus's writings, he says that good and bad can only come from your own self, and that is all we've got. Our own choices, our own assents to impressions. So what about training your own self first as an observer, then maybe after some time you can upgrade from observer to suggester or a mentor that speaks to yourself, that is the weaker self. Because in my stage in my life right now, I'm practicing that observing, specifically when I go for morning walk or a run. Then that laziness voice comes in, that procrastinating, that you don't have to go. And that voice, when I observe that as myself, then I find myself weak and not very, I think I see the pathetic face of that weakness that I'm saying to myself. So maybe I can mentor myself. Is that a good idea? What are your thoughts on it? Mentoring your own self. Yeah.
Yeah, so my gut reaction, and I think is going to be backed up with my later words, hopefully, is no. Don't mentor yourself. If you think about it, you mentoring yourself, you're mentoring your own wisdom. Your own wisdom is limited to what you know, and a mentor has to have knowledge you don't know. right? That's the point of a mentor. They have things that they're going to give you the wisdom that you don't have. And we talked about in Stoicism before about relying on people for accountability partners. And there is the idea in Stoicism, you need to be self-sufficient. That's the name of the game here, right? You got to be able to find that good and evil in yourself. So where do accountability partners come into that? If you're, for me, let's say I wanted to go a week without drinking. I'm saying I'm going to go 7 days no drinking. I need somebody to kind of hold me accountable with that and check in and make sure I'm staying on that path. Stoically, that doesn't really mesh well, because just like you said, Walker, those decisions come from within my own self. I cannot be looking to external anything to say, hey, do you approve or disapprove of this as good or evil? I need to recognize that in myself. But I've always argued that if you're in a transitory period where you're trying to transition from one behavior to the next, it helps to have an aid. It helps to have a crutch. It helps to have somebody to hold your hand to show you the way and say, hey, these are tips and tricks and mechanisms you can implant in your life to better set yourself up to success rather than failure, because I've learned these are time-tested true ways. One of the difference between animals and us, I would like to think, I don't speak animal in a lot of realms, but we have the ability to communicate and hold on to ideas of, don't go drink that water by that river because it's going to make you sick. Go drink your water over here. And, is holding that idea of passing on that knowledge to others is why I immediately think you can't mentor yourself. And I say that based on this principle. So in the military and jujitsu, I do jujitsu now, there's an idea that you need somebody to mentor you, somebody to teach you. That's one person. You need a peer to practice with, to try out those ideas. And then you need somebody below you to teach. So it's 3 people you need in your life to become an expert in something. And the idea being, of course, it's pretty clear that somebody's teaching you, feeding you new information. You have to put that into action with somebody to actually put it into motion. And then what keeps you honest to make sure that you really have a clear understanding is to teach it to somebody. Because if you've ever taught an idea to somebody else, you recognize you need to probably know more than you're actually going to give. Because if you've ever been in a situation where you get a curious student and you don't know what you're talking about, you're going to find yourself in a world of hurt pretty quick as far as it goes to credibility. So that's why I've tried to do that in my life in a lot of ways, honestly, when it comes to professionally, when it comes to how I raise my kid right now, like anything that I'm trying to get better at. I've always tried to have that idea. Let me go find a mentor. Let me find somebody to practice with and somebody to teach. A lot of times you have to create those scenarios in my head, right? I don't have a mentor right now to teach me how to, I don't know, pick something, right? If you can't find somebody to mentor you physically that's going to give you the actual words of advice, then, oh, Sri, hey, I'm sorry, I see you're going to drop off. Do you want to answer your question real quick?
Hey, Eric. Yeah, no, I don't mean to interrupt though. I just wanted to leave the idea that I think of. It's hard for me to find a mentor because for me, I'm looking for a whole mentor, right? And I wouldn't know the whole life of them unless I actually sit down and know them, start knowing them. So, and sometimes you realize not everybody's perfect. So the way I have learned is, because I'm a technical manager, if somebody is good at some piece of the technical, they're my mentor for that piece, and if somebody is good at being a friend, they are my mentor for that. But I struggle with finding one whole person because it's a lot to ask for maybe, or it's a lot to find. And I almost lost hope of finding that one person. So that's what I'm just going to leave you with. It's my mom's birthday, so I have to get back on her call with her. But yeah, I haven't been successful, and I don't know if I will be, but I will be successful if I break it into pieces of what I want and who I look up for that want.
I love it. I think we're on the same page as Mason too, with his mental board of advisors, kind of getting pieces of different people. Yeah, it's hard to find that one person.
And
So,
can I
well,
just
hey,
say something quickly to Shri before you leave? Look at that. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Creative. Oh, I love that. It's all
Do you love it?
Yeah.
You use it?
I don't, but I like the picture. I just saw
Oh.
from the picture, it's different things coming together, isn't it?
So if you get that whack pack. I do a whack pack reading a day, and you just ask yourself a question, whatever you're going to want to do. And they're all going, and I lay down 5 cards, and it will tell you different ways of thinking from different philosophers, because I love Stoicism, but I studied philosophy throughout my university years, regardless of what I was actually studying, because I needed to take extra classes for just to include that. So Whack Pack does that for you. It's like you have all these minds that will say, this is probably another way of thinking about that you wouldn't have ever conceived of, because you would have said, why would I even think of it that way? Well, with this, you're going to be thinking of it that way. So I would suggest you use that first until you find an actual human, because, you know, Stoics, we talk to the dead, because we always go and revisit our writings.
Yeah. I've heard those before too. And I great advice. So Sri, I will say goodbye. Happy birthday to your mother. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. I'm actually gonna get out of here soon too. We got a big hike coming up today. But
Thank
I just
you.
wanted to thank you, Sri. Have a good one. You know, this idea of a single mentor, I just watched a documentary with the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu and their friendship, and it really centered on the joy they had as friends. And Dalai Lama, I remember watching it going, he was in the queue. Like, I gave him a chance, and I said no, because his view and outlook on life was just so much different than I and the problems that I was facing in my life. But he just didn't rub me the right way as somebody that I thought that I could follow and be like, you know, have in my head to go, hey, Eric, you have to do this. So I'm going to take all your guys' advice. I love it, and I'll try to come up with a list of. I'm going to get my five members by next Sunday. I will hopefully have names in written down somewhere that are people that I have identified. I'm going to send Mason. I'll send you the list of the Stoic leaders I've found through military. Been great. First one, go read some stuff about General McClellan, or McClendon rather. Sorry, but yeah, he's probably going to be one on there. Yeah, Dave, what you got?
Just wanted to say thanks. My first time joining y'all. So glad I found y'all. I can totally relate for multiple reasons. Eric, I am also a political science major, history minor. I actually teach high school history. So I love it. I also have a wild and crazy 3-year-old at home that tries my patience. So I can relate completely, keeping calm. Ryan also broke up with my fiance a few months ago, so I feel you completely. And Waqar, I love what you had to say with the impressions. I love it. And I can't wait to join you all again. So I just wanted to say thank you for this group.
Absolutely. Hey, thanks for stopping by today. I really appreciate it. Just like, so I was, before I went to law school, I was a high school history teacher myself too. So a lot of similarities there.
Nice.
So I feel your pain in a lot of ways. So I, just like Ryan, I've broken up with a fiance too, and I have a 3-year-old, and I understand the pain of your professional life as well. So please come back, join us. We'll have more.
I will be
wisdom
for
to
sure.
share.
Thanks, y'all.
Good stuff.
And just to say that, Eric, and you saying broken up with a fiance is a better time than to say divorcing. So I'm divorcing. So if I had figured out and been stoic, then I would have broken up as a fiance.
Look, guys, I welcome anybody to relationship conversations. I'm on my 3rd marriage. I've broken up with 2 fiancés, and I am legitimately afraid that 23andMe is going to show me 4 or 5 sons and daughters that I don't have somewhere in the Southeast United States. So relationship advice, I'm a wealth of information for all of you guys. And I will tell you, tomorrow's going to be a brighter day as long as you make it that, right? Stoicism and relationships, it's fun. I'll say this and then I'll go. I found 2 holes in Stoicism, 2 chinks in the armor. One is intimate relationships, romantic, intimate relationships, your spouse. And this is where the idea of attachment has got me in trouble with some people. And I will say it till I'm blue in the face, that you cannot be attached to any person, thing, or idea ever. I don't care what it is, because they're all going to go away. And 2 is the sphere of influence. I've talked about it before, of how far I think I'm supposed to correct people when it comes to those false premises, right? So if my wife walks in here and goes, hey, did you know that such and such class of people are terrible at cooking? I have the right and I have a duty and obligation to correct her, right? anybody that's racist or spewing, you know, anything that doesn't have anything to do with equality, I will automatically correct them. But how far does that sphere of influence go? So I give the example, if I get in the car in New York City in a community I don't live in and the cabbie says something racist, should I correct him? Is it my stoic duty to do that? And then, like I said, the romantic thing. So those are the two areas of stoicism that I love debating with people. But other than that, stoicism to me, seriously, guys, has shown me the way to live the best life possible. And like Carr and everybody else has talked about, you know, applying these practices and these ideas to your life and having the courage to do that. Because remember, I'm going to say it every week, you are not these words. We're sitting in a room right now. If somebody was across the room, they're looking at you, you're doing nothing. I'm not doing anything. We're talking. We are not doing anything. You are your actions. So you have to take these principles and practices and ideas and go put them into actual use, do things, have the courage to act. And so I'm going to write down my names to get based on my list. And I'm going to try like hell to make sure I don't blush this week and let my body shake or convulse in any way. And I'll step away, breathe. I will detach from the situation. I will assess those impressions to whether they are false or true. And then I will respond. We never react. We respond only. All right. So unless anybody has anything else, I'm going to get away, guys. I'm going to go walk in the woods with my family. I hope you guys have a wonderful Sunday. And this week, I promise I will have those hour-long, starting tomorrow morning, actually. I'm going to start one at 7 a.m. We're going to start the week with me. Anybody wants to join me, come join me. And then we'll go off and come back next week. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Have a good week, guys. Take care.
Thanks.
Thanks, guy.